Hello students, we are in Studies in Theatre MOOC program and today I am going to take you to two different parts of the world through the discussion of theatre present in these two continents. One is South America, we call it Latin American theatre, and Australia. So this lecture will cover these two different geographical regions. Although a lot of things that you know about theatre can help you in understanding the things that are happening in these two continents also, but for the sake of dedicating some introductory inquiry, I am sharing this lecture with you. So, when we look at the indigenous theatre traditions, they are the basis of Latin American performance culture. Because both these lands, Australia as well as Latin America, they have been inhabited by indigenous people, aborigines, and they have been disturbed, uprooted, colonized by the European colonizers. So the first thing that existed in in Latin America was indigenous theatre tradition, which is rich and it predates the European colonization. And as with other performance cultures which are indigenous in nature, this is also based on rituals, festivals, ceremonies, and other kinds of aspects like dance, music, poetry, and expression methodologies, miming, acrobatics. Performers used to undergo training. They used to put on very attractive clothes, masks, and makeup, and they used to perform in some open spaces, elevated platforms, and highly decorated with very beautiful costumes. So this is called as the legacy of pre-Columbian theatre, the time when Columbus had not visited yet, and the times that existed before that. So this is the legacy. So colonial rule came and it destroyed so many things in Latin America, but the pre-Columbian theatre elements like ritualistic performances, storytelling, they are even today preserved in cultural heritage. Little bit, I will not say to a very big extent, because I have been to some parts of, I cannot claim that, if you visit to one country for few days or few weeks, you can claim to know everything about its past and present. But what I could feel is that very little has survived from that time, that is pre-Columbian era. And there has been resilience from the indigenous theatre practices, and that is for cultural autonomy, for self-expression, because of the colonial hegemony. And that sometimes, this hegemony, many a times hegemony becomes a very important energizing body to give vital energy to the things which are already suppressed. So poetry, music, art, theatre, literature, they get revitalized in the wake of suppressive atmosphere, and that gives birth to beautiful pieces, beautiful productions in the form of good poetry or protest poetry or resilient literature, resilient theatre being created, and that is with the pre-Columbian theatre as well. So theatre before conquistadors means the people who conquest, who made the conquest. That was before European colonization and the things that I already told you about it. So theatre then, when the colonial people came, it became the tool of colonization as well, because missionaries utilized theatre as a means to propagate their Christian doctrine among the indigenous people, and they were using the indigenous performance practice as an agency to deliver the content of the Christian text, and the theatrical productions therefore shifted to align with the colonial agendas in this method. So that's how colonial governments have always used in many parts of the country, many parts of the world. In fact, in India also, literature and theatre both were the agencies through which soft colonialism was perpetuated onto our own systems. So looking at the overall history of Latin American theatre, we see that It has its roots in early 20th century scholarship, but it gained formal recognition in the 1960s and 70s with the popular theatre movement. This was a movement in this system. This was a movement in, please cut this out. So, Latin American theatre studies have rooted in early 20th century scholarship, but this gained popularity only in 1960s and 70s with the popular theatre movement. And during the Cold War, the practice and scholarship was influenced by the advocacy for social change, representing the interests of working classes. There was also a system developing for the shared Latin American aesthetics methods in theatre in the entire continent, which is a big continent having several countries. So, this Latin American field maintains in theatre that there should be a focus on political, social dimensions of theatre, and it should adapt itself to represent the regional geopolitics of this continent and the different countries. A significant shift was visible in 1990s towards hemispheric perspective, aiming to address power dynamics between the US and Latin America, while highlighting shared cultural ties between US Latinx communities and Latin American artists. So, there was a mistake, I have corrected it, it needs to be cut out. So there was a shift in 1990s when the US people living in United States of America, the Latin people and the Latin American artists, they were seeking to create an hemispheric perspective, aiming to address the power dynamics between US and Latin America. That inspired a lot of theatrical intervention. So these are the themes and motifs that are present in the Latin American culture. Now today when you look at other aspects of the present, like make a complete list, you see that there is pre-Columbian indigenous theatre, which includes the civilizations like the Maya, Aztec and the Inca, and these involves rituals, ceremonies, masks, costumes, songs, acrobatics, body painting, these kinds of aspects of theatre. Then there is colonial theatre, the times in which the Spaniards and Portuguese were ruling the continent, and they were creating theatre and cultural practices of their own to suppress the indigenous cultures and also to spread the message of Christianity through the agency of the indigenous theatre practice. And then popular theatre, which examines the development of popular theatre movements such as Teatro di Cal, Teatro di Grupos, which emerged in response to social and political issues. So there have been many dictators, many political coups, a lot of upheavals, and that have also inspired theatre practice in South America. Political theatre therefore is very rich because it analyzes the role of theatre as a tool for activism, social awareness, recording the social stigma and the problems of people, what they face in their life, and how they have been subjugated to different kinds of corrupt regimes, the dictatorships and oppressions. So Teatro de la Crueldad means the theatre of cruelty in Argentina, and Teatro de Arena in Brazil. These are two embodiments of that kind of theatre which seeks to represent the painful experiences of the communities due to the corrupt and dictatorial regimes that have been there. In addition to this, there are experimental theatre which looks into the avant-garde and experimental practices that have challenged the boundaries of existing norms, indigenous norms, or whether the Colombian practices that were there or the colonial practices that remained there, the legacy of the colonial theatre that was there. So it was sought to be challenged with this experimentation, and artists like Augusto Boal and Eugenio Barba, they have influenced in this regard to a great extent. Then there are contemporary trends right now. which are investigating the innovations and advancements in Latin American theatre, looking at the interdisciplinary approaches, site-specific performances, and the technological intervention. Playwrights, directors are also seeking to write more and more about issues like globalization, migration, identity, politics, feminism, race, and the cultural hybridization, regional politics, environment. These are the things that are becoming very significant in the discussion of present day theatre. A lot of festivals and events are organized around them, and you see that South America has got one of the biggest forests, jungles of this planet, that is Amazon forest, and where the Amazon river flows, and this is called as the lungs of the planet, where so much oxygen is produced that it makes for the 20% of the oxygen supply of the entire planet. This one forest, one jungle. Now, there have been a lot of discussions around this environmental richness that South America has, and its cultural presence is so dominant in its whole geopolitical and social makeup that nothing can be left outside unless we discuss this. So theatre and performance culture is also benefiting a lot, and you can see the discussion on environment and other things are leading towards the discussion and the cultural heritage that Amazonian world has provided, and how to preserve it, how to look at the various ethnic tribes that live in the Amazon forests as the safeguard, as the saviors of the jungle, as the people of this land, and how their cultural practices, their performance traditions are incorporating the documentation of the human journey as well as the relationship between human beings and nature. So for education, for training, and through festivals, through events, theatre is very much present in Latin America like any other place. Latin American music is very famous. Its portrayal in films and all has led to a stereotyping, but theatre seeks to deviate away from that stereotyping and seeks to assert authentic Latin American spirit through its different hues and shades represented in the different countries, different cultures that are part of it. So if you look at Theatre of the Oppressed closely, you find that it is inspired by Paulo Freire and Bertolt Brecht. Augusto Boal created this Theatre of the Oppressed, and he aimed to combat injustice and advocate for social and political transformation through it. How this theatre is inclusive, it does not demarcate between the performers and the audience. It is inviting, it is where spectators are also spect actors. They turn into spect actors. They are also capable of interrupting, they can analyze the text, and they can participate in the depictions through that is happening in the performance. So there have been some branches of this like Theatre of the Oppressed, which includes image theatre, forum theatre, invisible theatre, and they have gained lot of popularity in asserting various messages through these genres, like for protest, for activism, for resistance, for political message, for awareness. These genres are used a lot. Then popular Latin American plays are like Kiss of the Spider Woman by Manuel Puig from Argentina. This play by Manuel Puig it's set in Buenos Aires prison in 1976, and it evolves the relationship between a revolutionary person called Valentin Araguipa and his cellmate Luis Alberto Molina. Now they are who is suspected of espionage. So there is a dramatic shift from conflict to love between them, and eventually it also ends up in betrayal. So this is an adaptation from a novel which was written by the same person, and although despite being an Argentine novelist, Puy also faced exile and for his political views and views on sexuality. This play, which premiered in 1985 in London, was very successful, and its revival took place in 2007, and a film has also been made. So, despite all these aspects of this play, the place, I think, is still not that much known for people like us in this part of the world. So, among the students, I want to send this message out that theatre studies is a field that has not been tapped much. It needs to be it needs to be explored deeper and further. And these are the kind of examples that validate what I am saying to you. Then this is another play by Roman Polanski, and this was first performed in Royal Court Theatre in 1991. It reached Broadway with renowned actors, and it won a lot of prizes. Then it was also adapted into a film, and its recent revivals have also taken place. So this is another thing. So these are the pictures that I have used, and now we move on to our discussion on the Australian theatre. So, like Latin America, like America, like India, like Africa, Australia also has its ancient historical performance history, like the corroboree. Corroboree is a tradition in indigenous Australian performance culture, which has ceremonial and ritualistic significance. And for thousands of years, indigenous Australians have been observing corroboree. It's a special event with music, dance, stories, and rituals. It usually happens in a sacred place, and which is important for indigenous people. They are connected to the land, and they also have a lot of belief systems related to the geographical features of Australian land. So it's a way of showing respect and commemorate the memory of the ancestors, the deceased people. This also leads to sharing tradition, enhancing the passage of tradition from one generation to the other, and bringing the people and communities and generations together. So colonization struck this hard, but this has survived. A lot of communities are still trying to sustain corroborees and other such traditions in Australia. You can see in some of these pictures that they are depicting few aspects of what I have said. Then the colonial era was there. It saw the emergence of theatre in Australia, and a lot of early plays were there. They were staged by European settlers for entertainment. You know, there is one play which I must recommend you. You should read that play. That is called as Our Country's Good. This is a play about how the convicts from England were taken to Australia, and those convicts were forced to perform a play. That was, you know, a play within the play. So inside the play, a rehearsal for a play is taking place, and that is the plot of the Our Country's Good play. The play covers two aspects of two plays, but it also covers various dimensions of the colonial enterprise that Australia had become for various European countries. How the convicts from different backgrounds of England, different low backgrounds of England were taken for small crimes. They were punished to be thrown out to Australia and live their life on their own. And in that hard life, in that hard atmosphere, how human spirit prevails and how it is able to perform a play, and what are the political and social dynamics of doing a play in such an atmosphere. So this is a good example. So that play also corroborates the fact that the convicts who were participating in the convicts who were taken to Australia from England were real people, because the play Our Country's Good is written on the basis of a diary of a police officer who had all these names written, and he was taking care of the ship on which these people were going to Australia. So history documents like these become very significant openings for us to write some artistic plots around them and represent the reality of past in an entertaining way, touching way, humane way, so that people come closer to history and also come closer to cultural practices and theatre performances. So the productions during this time were often informal and held in makeshift venues such as barracks, tents or community halls. The first known play in Australia happened in 1789. This is the play that I was talking about. This was performed by convicts and they put on a show called The Recruiting Officer by George Farquhar. This was originally performed, and around this performance is written the play Our Country is Good. So both the plays are interesting to be studied in correlation. Then in early 20th century Australian theatre, what we see is that it was getting influenced by ideas and styles from Europe like Expressionism, Surrealism, and the plays like The Doll, the Three Penny Opera, they were performed in Australian theatres. And several theatre companies were established in Australia, including the Independent Theatre in 1911 and the Union Theatre Repertory Company, which was later renamed as the Melbourne Theatre Company. This was established in 1953. Australian plays often talked about the important issues in society and politics, showing how things were changing. For example, in The Summer of the 17th Doll by Ray Lawler, written in 1955, the play looked at things like who people are, what are their social classes, what are their gender roles. So some glimpses of these pictures are for you to correlate with what is being told here. That although it was not a very vibrant theatre culture, but it was getting influenced by various kinds of changes that were taking place in European continent, and various theatre companies had started putting up plays in the well constructed theatre buildings now, which had been made because Australia had attained a very fast construction, very fast development into a developed country. Then when you look at the late 20th century Australian theatre, you have indigenous Australian theatre became an important paradigm to be revisited, and National Black Theatre started in 1972. The Aboriginal Islander Dance Theatre in 1985. These were established, and so this shows that there was by now a general awareness among the white Australians as well as the non-white Australians who were the real people of this land, that they were supposed to reclaim the losses that they had incurred, at least in whatever way it could be done, by bringing back the performance practices, by bringing back the cultural practices of that time. So that is visible in this. You see that this is not visible in the early 20th century or 19th century, because that was the time when the domination of the colonialist intentions was still there. And by post 1950s, this domination, especially with the end of the two world wars, the colonialist intentions were weakening, and Australia is now asserting itself among its own people, an identity of coexistence of whites as well as the non-whites, and trying to repay and trying to pay back to the aborigines, to the real people of Australia, what they had lost, at least giving them the claim and acknowledging their claim that they are the real people and they deserve to be in that land as much as any other person, or they had the first right to be there. So these kinds of political narratives were now gaining some voices, and the result of this is visible that by the time you see 1980s, 1991 or 70s, the theatres of Aboriginal people, the real Australians, the non-whites, they are being celebrated. So another Australian theatre explored themes of cultural identity, multiculturalism. For example, The Removalists by David Williamson in 1971, The Golden Age by Louis Novra in 1985. They were talking about the diversity of Australia, cultural diversity of Australia, social dynamics of Australia, not just having the whiteness, but having different kinds of ethnicities in it. Now we look at the 20th contemporary Australian theatre. Since the late 20th century, the theatre has been shaped by postmodernism, and which seeks to break away from the grand narratives, which seeks to celebrate the regional stories, the regional aura, the local, the traditional stories, the individuals, the smaller scale of narratives that is celebrated in the postmodern theatre, and which is visible in Australian contemporary theatre as well, which is looking to break down on traditional stories and ideas which has ideas like who has the power, how people are different from each other, how power dynamics have done good or bad to people, how it has been misused. Those kinds of themes are more and more visible. Contemporary Australian theatre also is celebrating lot of diversity of the country, like plays are talking about how different identities live here, how people are migrating to Australia, and what are their stories, how do they become Australia's core people, the sense of belonging that such people carry, and the sense of loss that such people have, and how it is part of Australia's community, communal memory, or the community enterprise, the community identity. Contemporary Australian theatre has also embraced experimental forms and new technologies, incorporating the multimedia elements, digital projections, and interactive experiences to create more immersive experiences and various. Now it is a lot of, it's a very open society, it's a very advanced country, and there have been lot of discussions on new kinds of promotion performance cultures being promoted, like the stand-up comedians of India visit Australia a lot. They are invited to present their gigs there. So this kind of correlation is strengthening the cultural makeup, cultural diversity of this land, and therefore there is a big shift from being the colonial land of people who subjugated and killed the real Australians, to the place where it is becoming a melting pot for various cultures and inviting people to live there, and lots of communities are migrating and taking with them their cultural identities and enriching the cultural diversity of Australia. So this is a different kind of a world, and that is visible in the performance space also. Technology is definitely a new agency, and it is ruling everywhere. It's not just one part of the world that digital intervention is visible in theatre, but in various parts of the world the digital intervention is visible in theatre. Now we look at the present Indigenous Australian theatre. It has emerged as a vibrant expression of cultural heritage. Companies like EBJRI, Bangara, Ira Yakin, they are very significant, and they are working a lot to strengthen, empower the original culture, the cultural heritage of Australia, the indigenous tradition of Australia, cultural practice in its authentic form, in its authentic hues and shades, without bordering on any museumization or stereotyping, because that fear is always there, that danger, that possibility of slipping into a stereotyping or slipping into museumizing of things which we feel we are doing some kind of good to them. But it's not we or us. It's somebody who thinks that I have been wronged, I can say it better. I think from there begins the right kind of portrayal. So if you look at the indigenous performance cultures across the world, you will see that until the time the people themselves took over the control to represent what they had to say and what they had to show, the presentation on stage was stereotyped. The representation was very cosmetic, very peripheral. They were always looked at objective objects of amusement as museum pieces. So this is important that as a person of theatre, one must have this awareness that if I am doing some kind of play where I am supposed to showcase a tribal story along with the tribal culture, will I be able to do justice to it without letting it slip into stereotyping or museumizing or just using it as an object of amusement? So this care has to be taken. So it's the best thing is that those who are part of that entire system, those who have gone through it, those who have felt it, those who have been there, and those who have been accepted by the authentic people, indigenous people, those who have the endorsement from them, only such people should come forward to claim that they have done some kind of, they want to do some kind of plays or representations where indigenous tradition of theatre and performance are going to be safeguarded or represented. So that is happening right now. So Australian example of indigenous theatre culture is, I think, a very healthy example as compared to the other examples like in African performance tradition, because of Wole Soyinka, because of Ngugi wa Thiong'o, because of Chinua Achebe. This could happen a lot in literature, although Wole Soyinka's plays have done great justice to the representation of the whole Yoruba representation, Yoruba tribes representation. But what about others? They have not been represented so far in that authentic manner, and that remains unnoticed. The celebration of only one tribe is not enough. It is something that all of us need to understand and all of us need to acknowledge and take it forward for the welfare of so many indigenous cultures that are lying dormant, unnoticed, unacknowledged, badly represented, appropriated in the modern performance culture. So, look, many a times, indigenous performers are invited to perform in big events like the opening of the Olympic Games, football international tournaments. This has happened. So, without knowing what this performance is, and if that performance is taking place in a stadium full of people where they do not have, because while such events take place, people of different countries are often the audience in stadiums. So when this kind of performance is taking place about which people do not know, or it is being telecast live in different parts of the world and people do not know about it, that what is happening here, and it is just shown as this is something Australian, we are proud of it, it's not enough, because that actually is a bad treatment to that form. I'm not saying we should not do that. I'm saying that there is a need for sensitizing people more and more. So there has to be patience on the part of the organizers, and there has to be patience on the part of the audience to be more responsive towards such things and give time to understand, listen to what is being told about it, some information. Then there is justice with this kind of performance. So indigenous word sounds very, very good, very fancy, but to what extent are we able to justify its treatment is important for us as a theatre practitioner, as a theatre researcher. All discussions are not just discussions. Any discussion is not good discussion. Just for the sake of it, we discuss it is not going to be enough. So this is a choice that one has to make, and I advise you people to assert your choices in the backdrop of information, in the backdrop of a sensitization, not without that. Then moving on, there is this bush theatre which began in the late 1800s and 1900s when people in rural areas were facing issues in reaching theatres. They started performing plays in makeshift venues like sheds or town halls, And these plays were all about rural life, featuring stories about farming, outlaws, and the challenges of living in the bush. So this plays, about the difficult life of people, how Australians suffered, and it also celebrates the strength of the communities, the rural people, how they express resilience and how they have come so far despite the hardships that they have faced. The similar kind of Bangara dance theatre, which was founded by Carol Johnson, Cheryl Stone, and Lynn Santos in 1989, because it fuses the traditional indigenous theatre with the contemporary dances, and it explores themes related to indigenous culture, how they are connected to land, the cultural identity that the people need to assert, and the issues that are part of their setup. So Ockers was one of the great performances choreographed by Stephen Page, and this production explores the connection between Aboriginal spirituality, landscape, and identity. Another play, Walkabout, was choreographed by Stephen Page, and this was about the spiritual journey of indigenous people. These pictures are telling you how the modern moves, modern choreography, and indigenous dances are fused together to assert the aspects of Australian culture, and trying to create the Australian identity of performance tradition where the modern and the tradition coexist. These are some playwrights of Australia, notable playwrights like David Williamson, 1942. He is renowned for his satirical and insightful plays exploring Australian society and culture. Plays like The Removalists in 1971, Dawn's Party, and The Club. So notable Australian playwrights include David Williamson, Kate Blanchett, Andrew Bovell, Hannah Gadsby, and Wesley Enoch. These playwrights have contributed a lot by writing the plays that are mentioned here. Have a look at it, and you can try reading and analyzing any one of the plays in the light of the topics that I have shared in this discussion. These are some Australian theatre companies like Sydney Theatre Company, the Melbourne Theatre Company, Queensland Theatre, Griffin Theatre Company, and Malthouse Theatre. These began in various kinds of time frames, and they are now enriching the theatre studies and theatre atmosphere of Australia. So this was a very brief kind of a discussion about Australia and Latin America, trying to adjust with the broader frameworks of this course, just to give you a very basic kind of inputs about these two cultures. I hope that this may give you some inputs to inspire yourself and take it further for advancement in these areas of studies of theatre. Thank you so much. I meet you in a different lecture now.